Hey, if you didn't know, it's June, which means it's Men's Mental Health Month. Because of that, I want to dedicate my videos to discussing how certain shows portrays men's mental health development through their respective stories. In today's video, I want to take a dive into A Silent Voice. So why A Silent Voice? Well, I believe A Silent Voice offers a brilliant and realistic portrayal of bullying and depression, something that deeply affected me when I first watched it back in middle school. It was beautifully well made, the voice acting was top notch, and the plot felt so real to me. If you don't know what I'm talking about, A Silent Voice is a 2016 anime film based on a manga with the same name written by Yoshitoki Orima. The movie was adapted by Kyoto Animation and directed by Naoyuka Yamada. To this day, A Silent Voice remains my favorite anime movie of all time. I feel a personal connection not only to the movie but the main protagonist Shōya Ishida and how the story handles his mental health journey, dealing with depression, suicidal thoughts, and ultimately redemption. The goal of my video is to analyze how the story redeems Shōya for the actions he committed in his past. Spoiler warning, if you haven't seen the movie, you've been warned. Before we continue, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers before fall starts. Now, let's jump right in. So if you haven't seen A Silent Voice, that's totally fine. It just gives me more reasons to talk about it. In my words, A Silent Voice is a story that revolves not only around Shōya Ishida, but also Shōko Nishimiya, a deaf girl. This matters because Shōya was ostracized not only by his classmates and his peers, but eventually isolating himself out of guilt on how he treated Shōko back in elementary school. So what did he do? Well, he bullied her. And honestly, calling it bullying feels too light to describe the harassment and torment he put her through. So if the bullying was really as bad as I described, you might be wondering, why did he feel guilty enough for it to lead to his social isolation and deep depressive state? Well, viewer, this is where context comes to play. So let's set the stage for what happened. When Shōya was in elementary school, he had a friend group that consists of Naoka Ureno, Miki Kawai, Keisuke Hirose, and Kazuki Shimida. Alongside them, we have two additional key characters, another classmate named Miyoka Sahara and their homeroom teacher, Mr. Takeuchi. When Shōko was introduced, the rest of the students could already tell that she was a little different. As we established earlier, Shōko is deaf. Keep in mind, while she can speak due to her disability in her young age at the time, she can't properly regulate her volume of her voice, which often makes her sound unusual. To help her integrate fully into the class, the school encourages students to communicate with her through her notebook or learning how to use sign language. However, we see quickly how because of Shōko's differences, she was gradually casted aside by the majority of the other students. Although this didn't happen immediately, over time it became clear through gossip about her disability and the school was making proper accommodation to better help her assimilate, the class began to view Shōko as a burden or an inconvenience. And we can really feel how much Shōko tries to blend in, but no matter what she does, she can never truly fit in with the crowd. What this movie does so well is portray how realistic and common these kind of situations can be, and how early events within a person's life can shape their entire trajectory. This matters because I don't entirely blame the kids for how they treated Shōko at the time. They simply didn't know any better. I don't expect children to fully understand the weight of their action, especially without the right guidance. I'm saying this because in truth, Shōya wasn't the only one who bullied Shōko. It was a unified effort from most of the kids within their class, except for Miyoko. And while Shōya did somewhat spearhead the bullying, ultimately, the real fault lies with the one adult within the situation, Mr. Takeuchi. But before we talk about this guy, let's talk about this guy. Throughout the early parts of the movie, I can't help but notice how often Shōya is shown in frame, watching and reacting to how his peers mistreat Shōko. This tells me one thing: Shōya is a kid who clearly values his social life, even at a young age. Since humans are naturally social creatures, it makes sense for us to seek social validation. As he started joining in on the bullying of Shōko, he was only encouraged by his closest friends. But what's more troubling is that despite this behavior happening openly, it was never addressed by their teacher, the only adult who had the responsibility of caring for the well-beings of all his students. Yes, what Shōya did was wrong, no question about it. but in this situation, he was the only one who got punished while everyone else who was guilty walked away scot-free, including the teacher. Before things got out of hand, Mr. Takahashi could have stepped in at any point, held a meeting with Shōya and his mother, and put a stop to it once and for all. But you know what he did instead? When the principal confronts the class and threatens to start an investigation about Shōko's bullying, he blamed everything on Shōya, fully knowing that it was a class-wide effort. This decision ultimately set Shōya on a path of being bullied and struggling with his own mental health, while the other students, the ones just as responsible, faced no real consequences for what they did. Yes, even though Shōya was the bully, he also became the victim, and the only two people who seemed to feel any sympathy for his predicament was Shōka and Naoka. What I love about Silent Voice is how the movie was able to redeem Shōya's past sins in such a tasteful and thoughtful way. I remember when I first watched this movie back when I was in middle school, I hated this little brat. Any sympathy I might had for him in the beginning when they saw him contemplating taking his own life went right out the window, but as the story unfolded, I saw something in Shōya, and that was growth. We saw in the act of karma, Shōya became the one who got ostracized through the rest of his academic life. He became the victim of bullying, and this allowed him to truly see and feel what Shōko has gone through, what they had put her through. But instead of being angry or thinking that he didn't deserve it, Shōya simply accepted his fate. He understood that this was a mess he helped created, and he did the one thing no one else from his class ever did. He took responsibility for the group's action and bore the pain and humiliation that came with it, but at the cost of his mental stability and the betrayals of his closest friends. We see how Shōya keeps himself at a distance, avoiding eye contact out of shame, ultimately shutting everyone out and truly becoming alone. And oh my god, how you can't help but feel for him. His biggest problem is that he still blames himself for what happened and uses it as a constant reminder of why his life is the way it is right now. Throughout the movie, we see how Shōya tries to befriend Shōko in efforts making things right, not just to make himself feel better, but in truth, it's because he owes it to her. We see this in how he doesn't try to force Shōko in any way, even learning sign language in hopes of properly making amends with her and communicating better. Yes, in the first half of the movie, he sometimes looks for a good excuse to talk to her, but it was always in good faith, and he generally works his way up to building a proper connection with Shōko. Just as things start looking up, he finally begins to open up to the people around him. Then he came face to face to something that truly never leaves: his past. Just as Shōya is starting to get comfortable, it feels like everything comes crashing down after the amusement park incident involving Naoka and Shōko. Then we get to the bridge scenes where Shōya, Shōko, Naoka, Yuzuru, Tomohiro, Sasatori, and Miki venting about who's really at fault for what happened to Shōko back in elementary school. This scene really got under my skin because of one person, and that person is Miki. To me, Miki is the worst type of individual. She's that person who always stood by watching others get hurt while keeping up the facade of being innocent, but in reality, she's just as responsible as Shōya. In an earlier scene, when Shōya rightfully calls her out in her role of bullying Shōko, she broke down crying, insisting that she didn't do anything wrong, as if she was the victim. No, you do not get to rewrite history. It's because of this kind of denial that Shōya ended up here. Yes, Shōya did wrong, but the difference is that out of everybody responsible, he was the only one who took the fall. We see this again when Naoka blames Miki for what happened. This causes Shōya to once again blame himself, pushing everybody out of his life except for Shōko and her sister. Because at the end of the day, he realizes no matter how much others tries to play the victim, the real victim is Shōko. And it seems to me that he wants to prioritize rebuilding his relationship with her. If you were to ask me what's the biggest takeaway from A Silent Voice, it would be that it's a story of self-forgiveness. At every turn, we see Shōya trying to take the blame for what happened in his past, and while that is a step in the right direction, blaming himself and harboring that guilt is actually a step backwards. Because even when he gains Shōko's trust, the only other person whose trust he needs to earn is his own. Only in an honest act of selflessness, where he unhesitatingly put his life on the line for Shōko and realized that the people around him truly cared, he finally forgave himself. He was then willing to let others back into his life, symbolized by the X marks falling off of everyone's faces. In that moment of relaxation, he finally started to cry, feeling at his most vulnerable and comfortable, overcoming the heavy burden of what he himself had created. Shōya, in the eyes of his peers, in the eyes of the audience, and more importantly, within his own eyes, was redeemed. I had an amazing time rewatching this masterpiece of a film. And it's kinda obvious why Silent Voice is still my most favorite anime movie of all time. If you know me personally, you know I rarely rewatch shows for fun unless it's important or it's actually peak, and Silent Voice is both. The way it was able to portray real bullying is deeply touching, and how it shows Shōya's mental progression. It was beautifully well executed. The reason I chose this film for my first video for Men's Mental Health Month, it's even harder to work towards forgiveness from the person you wronged, but you know what? The hardest thing is being able to forgive yourself. If you enjoyed this breakdown, considering leaving a like and subscribe. We're pushing for 1,000 subscribers before fall, and with your help, we can make that happen. My name's Taken, and we do a little reviewing around here. Until next time, peace out.